Hey YouTube, welcome to another episode or another NRW video actually. My name is David.
And I'm Rob the Movie Guy.
And we got something very special for the next couple of weeks coming to you guys. Rob and I are actually super hyped and super excited for the newest release in the Rambo franchise, Last Blood. So we're going to be doing something special this time around for the release of that on September 20th.
Right, so we're going to be doing a review each week for each of the films in the series leading up to Last Blood here. So before we get into that, let's roll the trailer for First Blood.
Play it.
John Rambo, a drifter, just passing through their town.
Morning! Headed north or south?
North.
Now jump in. I'll make sure you head in the right direction, huh?
You got someplace I can eat around here?
There's a diner about 30 miles up the highway.
Is there any law against me getting something here?
Yeah, me. I want you to book this gentleman for vagrancy, resisting arrest, carrying a concealed weapon.
They knew he was innocent.
Starting to dislike you. A lot.
And they didn't give a damn.
That's okay, Warren. Don't worry about the soap. He's tough. Just save him. Try.
Don't move. I don't want you to cut your own throat.
John Rambo, one man who's been pushed too far.
You're finished! You've gone as far as you're gonna go! Heading straight for the top. Right on top of him. There's no way out of here except through us.
He was hunted. Trapped.
There he is! On the cliff!
And forced to fight back.
Don't push it. Don't push it. I'll give you a war you won't believe.
Teasel, you and all your men couldn't handle him before. Now, what makes you think you can handle him now?
Because God knows what damage he's prepared to do.
You don't seem to want to accept the fact that you're dealing with an expert in guerrilla warfare.
Are you telling me that 200 men against your boy is a no-win situation for us?
You send that many, don't forget one thing. A good supply of body bags.
Sylvester Stallone. This time, he's fighting for his life. First Blood.
That is some 80s awesomeness right there.
Yeah, so cheesy, so bad, but so good.
So good. Well, I want to start off just by saying that my introduction to the Rambo series, I know for a fact it was when I was a child. Had been seeing it on TV, like on TBS or something like that. And I have already been a Stallone fan prior to that. So as soon as I saw him, I was already hooked and then fell in love with the series from there. I think the first one I saw was First Blood Part 2, if I'm not mistaken. But that was my introduction to Rambo there. What was your introduction to Rambo?
I'd have to blame my dad. He was the kind of guy who'd go to the video store like every weekend or so or on his day off and come home with like videotapes of like really bad cheesy B-movie action flicks.
Yeah.
You know, if it's not Chuck Norris, it was Van Damme. If it wasn't Van Damme, it was Steven Seagal. If it wasn't Steven Seagal, it was Stallone.
Yeah.
And the main ones from Stallone, it was going to be Rocky or Rambo. And it was because of him. Can't go wrong with it. As a kid growing up watching the movies, I thought it was awesome that my dad was letting me watch these violent, crazy, awesome, gun-ho movies, that my brothers and I were try to reenact. But it was a fun watch for what it was. It was kind of one of those crazy action explosions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
For this flick, I watched it so many times over, and it's something that I know I can sit down with my dad and watch over again and be like, yeah, I remember watching this with you.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about this film in particular is that it's, despite the era of which the film deals with here, it still holds up very well, I think, especially out of all of the films in the series. This one by far really speaks volumes with not doing so much action, but more focusing on the character, and then letting the story and the characters kind of just really stick out, rather than having to do with all the action as you see in the later sequels here, which we'll get into in those reviews. But I think one of the more interesting aspects of this story here is the fact that what went into making this film here too. I'm sure, as you already know, we've had several actors attached to making the film. Steve McQueen being I think the first choice, but by that point he was already too old to play the part for a Vietnam veteran in this film. And then we've had other actors such as Gene Hackman, Robert Duvall, Kirk Douglas was attached at one point to play Colonel Troutman, and then he ended up leaving literally weeks before the filming had begun due to some differences that he had with the scripts, where he wanted to keep the original ending from the book, which this movie is based on, First Blood, written by Dave Morrell back in '72, where in that story, Rambo dies at the end. In the
I think it plays out the same, close enough to the movie, except there's a little bit more death, more violence in the book, and in the end, Rambo ends up getting taken out by either the sheriff's or Troutman's shot.
Right, and I think, and also in the book too, whereas in this film, Rambo doesn't kill anybody except for that one thing where he threw the rock at the helicopter and the guy fell out, but it wasn't really caused by him to do that. But essentially, it was the catalyst that led to his that man's death. But he never really kills anybody in this film at all, quite frankly. And whereas in the book, he's on a murderous rampage after he is instigated to having to leave, and they decided to hold him against his will, and he's getting all these flashbacks from Vietnam, which is a lot like in the movie as well too. And then he decided to go on a murderous rampage, and then eventually meets his demise at the end. Whereas in this film, the approach was slightly more different to make him more sympathetic for us to relate to him as an audience to this character here. So,
only as a character, but to his own plight that he was going through. Not being accepted, being treated differently for what he had went through, and nobody really understanding the horrors that he had gone through. In the war, and because apparently some backstory, he did join the military like a little bit after high school, apparently.
That's how I understood it. Yeah. So and that was one of the wonderful things about that. Even time, although it is an action film, but it was different from all the other action films that were coming out during that era there, where this was more focused on a very sympathetic character. As you see in the film, he's breaking down and crying at the end, and you see this whole build up that leads to that moment, and you kind of see his true personality come out, where he just doesn't want any of this anymore. He just wants to be treated right and wants to be respected and wants to be accepted by the U.S. people here. And so, that aspect of the character I thought was very different the characters you see in action films in that era there. So when it came to that, I thought that's where it stuck out the most, and it really stands out amongst all the action stars, which is one of the reasons why I think most people in the world recognize Stallone for either Rocky, which you have another sympathetic character, and you have Rambo, which again you have another sympathetic character. Two different spectrums of the field, of course, but they resonate with the audience because they understand his motives, they understand where he comes from when it comes to those characters there. And that's a very hard thing to do, to have two iconic characters by one actor and still hold very well for the love that and the fanaticism that comes with that. I think speaks volume, because you have a great actor in Sylvester Stallone, which I don't think a lot of people give him a lot of credit for. That this film is actually more of a dramatic turn outside of Rocky and outside of some other dramatic films he's done prior to this film. But this film really did something different for his career, which you can see where you see him handle the action very well, because physically he's more than capable of doing that. But when it came to the emotional aspect of it, I mean, come on.
The guy did his homework. He actually did. He did some survival training and preparation for the role, and then and like you said earlier, he did help with the writing or rewriting of the script, and it took 7 revisions for him to finally be happy. You actually mentioned earlier, we did speak about his interview about the film and how he hated it.
So the story was that I think he was on Howard Stern, where he mentioned that he saw a 3.5-hour version of the film and absolutely hated it because there was a lot of horrible dialogue, which some of which I'm wondering how much was him actually writing that stuff that he decided to keep in the original script. One of them was the fact that where he's walking into that small town, and the sheriff comes up to him and he says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "You ever heard of Easy Rider?" He's like, "Yeah. Well, I'm Easy Walker." Like that was literally one of the lines that he says in the film, which I would love to see, how that actually plays into the film. And he realized that all this talking that Rambo does in the film was just flat out terrible. So he took out most of his dialogue, which I wonder how much dialogue there was in the original film, in the original cut rather, that it had to be cut down from 3.5 hours to 90 minutes to kind of leave virtually no dialogue for Rambo and have everybody else do the exposition for him, which I thought was really good because it worked very well for the film.
Yeah, it did. It really did. And it kind of helped the film, to be honest. Because you didn't really need much dialogue from Rambo because you were experiencing everything through him and with him.
Yeah.
And you're kind of just trying to help, hope that he made it through.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's pretty much it. Like, we don't really need a synopsis, because that's pretty much it. Guy comes into town, drifter, looking for his buddy, finds out his buddy passes away, so he goes try to get something to eat, and he gets hounded by the sheriff, who ends up trying to, just kind of pull a power play on him.
Yeah.
I guess he just didn't like him. In the book, it goes a little bit more because he was a Korean War vet.
Yeah.
And this is a Vietnam vet, but he just didn't like the fact that he was a drifter and thought he would cause trouble in his town, essentially causing his own trouble in his own town.
Yeah.
Because he kept just messing with Rambo. And then Rambo just goes on a rampage of revenge in a way, because like the movie says, they drew first blood, and he just wants his payback. I just wanted something to eat.
Pretty much. Well, let's get into some of the positives here with the film, which I know there's a lot of it here to cover. But you mentioned about the sheriff, played by the actor Brian Dennehy. That portrayal of this character could have gone wrong in so many different ways there, because you have a guy who is egotistical, who's very prideful, and clearly feels like a sense of entitlement with his power that he has. And had it been played by somebody else, or had it been played differently by the same actor, it could have gone south in many ways here. But his portrayal of that character, not only was it, we understand his point of view, especially in certain scenes in the film where you kind of have that one-on-one with Troutman, where he's talking to him and trying to understand where he's coming from with Rambo and so on, and you kind of hear his side of the story, and you kind of have some sympathy for him. But then he reverts right back to his power play, and then realizes he's been defeated and refuses to accept it, despite the fact that he has nothing else to offer to counter Rambo.
Yeah,
that portrayal of this character, although I would call him a villain, but it's more of a, I don't know, how would you describe like a villain in these terms?
He was the main antagonist of the film.
Yeah.
Let his pride get in the way. He had something to prove, that the boys could do it, and they failed miserably.
Yeah.
And that kind of came into a head when Troutman comes in. He's like, "Oh, well, I'm not here to save him from you guys. I'm here to save you from him."
Right.
And that whole scene just kind of like boils it down.
Yeah.
Where he's in over his head. So he thinks he can still take advantage of the situation, still think he could get ahead of it, but he has no idea what he's dealing with.
Yeah, I agree too. And then you mentioned about we were just talking about Troutman here, portrayed by Richard Crenna, which literally is his best role that he's ever done, even to the point where pop culture references are made using his character in several different other films. One of them being Hot Shots, I believe, is the first one. There's that wonderful scene where he's like in the behind the bamboo cage, and he's able to walk out trying to get the keys to unlock himself out, which I thought was hilarious. But that's in reference to Rambo 3, I believe. But I mean, it was so ingrained in pop culture later on in his career that everyone knew him as Troutman. And this guy's had experience for many years acting before this film. And but that just speaks volumes of how good he was in that role. And then, of course, you have the big star of the film in Sylvester Stallone, who essentially turned a character that could have turned into a more psychotic approach, and decided to take a more sympathetic approach, as we mentioned before, and really brings out some of his best dramatic acting abilities in the film, especially towards the end of the film, where you saw him breaking down and just crying and wanting to be accepted. And you really did believe it when you see him get to that point there. I mean,
He just breaks down, and the story he tells just that still stays with you. You know, the shoe shine box, and trying to get his buddy back together. And we were just kids. We can go driving. You know, we can go drive in his car. Like,
yeah, a little bit of Rocky comes out of
you know, like. um, but like it was such an emotional scene to kind of see like this is just a broken man coming back to a broken home where nobody accepts him, nobody can accept him. You know, and he even said it in the speech, like, you know, I'm over there. I'm working with heavy machinery. It was, you know, $2,000 heavy, whatever, $1,000,000 machinery. Here, I can't even get a job.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of a plight that not just then at the time that our vets do it, but vets deal with it now. You know, integrating back into normal society is difficult for them. And I think it's part of the message that the movie was trying to portray as well, was just like kind of like, hey, the unequal, unfair treatment of the vets that do come back. Because what do they come back after they've been broken?
Yeah.
Perfectly.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that stuck out for me was the fact that it wasn't just it's not like a typical, in this case, let's say like a Chuck Norris film, especially during that time where he's doing such films like a Delta Force 1 and 2, where he was just like almost like a robotic type of character where he's a silent guy, but no one messes with him and he's able to take out an entire army with one machine gun type of thing, which eventually kind of becomes the sequels here for Rambo. But it's the story was really the driving force for the film, and then the characters really filled in the gaps with the portrayals of the actors here. But I mean, one of the wonderful things about the film was the fact that they're using the what's the word I want to use? Like they're using the environment as a character in the film as well too. You have the backdrop of the woods where clearly these guys who are running the town, who are protecting the town, have no idea how to use this environment to capture this one guy. And this guy who's never been there before, having the experience with war and having been out in the jungle and learning how to survive and how to adapt to the situations, this guy is just taking them out, without I wouldn't say without breaking a sweat, but you catch my drift here. But
it was like it was nothing. And yeah, I was gonna get to that point too. Like, the town itself is a character because they used that backdrop so well, like the small town area, the wooded area, the police station, and how it ran off to the streets. Like it kind of really showed, especially near the climax at the end where he's kind of holed up in the store and everything. Like it was just really, really well put together. Kind of like using what they had to kind of tell that story.
Yeah.
They could have gone, even more, but of course they kind of took and that's for the next film for what they did, more jungle stuff. But they did everything right, where they set up the story and they didn't put too much into anything else, but they kind of used these three characters kind of drive the story home and set that backdrop, and they did it beautifully.
Yeah, I agree too, and I think like I said before, one of the beautiful aspects of the story too that also helps sell the film for me was apart from the acting and the environment that they're in, the music. That music for the theme for Rambo always sticks out to me. So every time I hear the theme to that Rambo to the film, it's I wouldn't say it's almost as iconic, say like Rocky, where you hear dun 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 dun. It's nothing like that though. But when I watch the film, every time I think of a film, especially a scene with any of the series in the film, that background, that music in the background always plays in the back of my mind there. So for me, especially with some of the emotional scenes and some of the more climatic scenes as well too, having that music in the background plays very well with it as well too. So everything kind of balances each other out too when it comes to telling the narrative for this film here. But one of the things that I want to get into too was some of the negative aspects of the film. I know before we started recording, we were talking about what we thought was cheesy about the film, and you mentioned that it's definitely a dated film, but I still think it holds up very well in comparison to all the other films in the series. This one holds out very well, with the exception, I would say, what the last Rambo film that came out. For me, some of the aspects of how the soldiers or the National Guard soldiers were coming in and had no idea how to properly use their weaponry, or they just didn't know how to handle the stressful situation that they're in, kind of just plays out more like a comedy, like a sitcom, and it almost seems so uneven in those scenes there where you have these guys talking to one another and they're just making these jokes, and then you go back to Rambo, who is trying to survive, and it's like watching two different films there. So that unevenness for me, what stuck out for me the most with the film. I'm not sure if you had the same sentiments.
Yeah,
When it came to
I
that.
noticed that because it was kind of this weird banter. Like, hey, Bob, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah,
and I think it was supposed to show the contrast between like these guys are bumbling town folks and have no idea what they're dealing with.
yeah,
Because like you even said, like, they all knew each other. It was like that's kind of a small town. And everyone's going to their National Guard. So, Bob and Billy are gonna come and take care of this.
yeah,
I think they kind of did to kind of show like their expertise were nowhere near what Rambo was able to pull off,
yeah,
and it showed. It showed, especially with they couldn't follow orders. They couldn't. They let him go more than once, and got away, and he got away. Um, but yeah, I kind of see how like yes, the movie is dated, and it's not something that watching now I'm like that wouldn't fly today, that wouldn't happen today. But at that time in the 70s and that 80s area time frame, I mean, yeah, you could see that being possible, feasible, and actually happening. And
yeah,
then watching it on the news, oh man, there's a crazy guy on TV, like taking out a whole town by itself. How's it going to
yeah,
happen? I see it being possible in that time frame.
yeah.
Here nowadays, no, it did be over way sooner than it would.
Yeah, I don't even think it would have ever escalated to that point either.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
have
not even,
the National Guard show up for one man. I mean, seriously.
yeah, yeah. But
uh,
like again, like you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit to enjoy the movie, and I think that's what it is. It's your your usual at that time. I think it was like like the movie. I was gonna say sequential '80s film, action film, because it did start that spark of that. After that, it was just action, action. Your adrenaline rush kind of
yeah,
flick, and it wasn't really. You could say like it was a war film, but it was like a different war film for that time period because it had dealt with how they came back, and
yeah.
and they did it in such a what's the word I'm looking for? Like
I mean, they did it in a pretty epic way, but within close quarters, really.
yeah,
So
of course I want to say in a familiar area.
yeah,
And that's what really kind of like I really enjoy about this movie because like I watch the other movies, but it's in the jungle. It could be anywhere, but there it's like it's kind of close to home, and like it can happen. Like, well, what would you do? How would how would a person actually get away with to the point of doing all that collateral damage for one?
yeah,
Stealing all that. Speaking of stealing, did you know in the filming of this movie, some of the weapons and stuff were stolen?
yeah. I think I read about that too.
I had no idea. I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of odd though. Like, I can't imagine walking away with thousands upon thousands of dollars of ammunition, and somehow no one noticed it. I mean, it just seems a little odd though. But yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that too, because a lot of the stuff that went on in the film, as far as the ammunition was concerned, that was one of the things that I wanted to bring out too. That you had the National Guard show up, and clearly these guys were weekend warriors. And when you look at the news, like, there's no way they're going to go up against Rambo, who has been through the shit. And then all of a sudden, you have Bob from down the street come up here with a bazooka and has no idea how to use it. And you really expect him to shoot it. And when he does shoot it, he's like, "That was awesome!" It's like, "Oh my god!" Like that kind of took me out of the element of the film, because the way that they handled the weapons. I think like what they're really trying to portray, for me at least, was to show that these guys aren't trained for that sort of stuff at all whatsoever. So not only are you having these weekend warriors who have virtually no training to handle this kind of stress level, but you're giving them access to these weaponry, and yet they have no idea how to use it. So it goes to show you that someone like Rambo, who's been through the shit, has gone through all the training, comes back, wants nothing to do with this stuff. And then you have these guys who are ignorant to the fact that they have access to this stuff, but yet have no idea how to use it, and they're giving permission to use it. So there's like a problem that you can see with the system that we have. That's one of the things I thought that was wonderful about the film, that despite the approach that they took to tell that side of the story, but if you pay close attention to it, you can kind of see where the U.S. system, if you will, has given access to the guys who shouldn't be using the weapons. Yet the guy that does have training to use the weapons, they're not giving him any access whatsoever. And he's not only is he being mistreated, but he's being outcast as well too, as a result of his choice in the war, his participation in his war here. So, like, there's a lot of things that can be said about that whole aspect of the film too. But I mean, overall, like my impressions of the film has never really changed. Quite frankly, it's actually gone up more as far as how much I love the film, and really solidified for me like why I think Stallone, for me personally, he is my favorite actor of all time. And
I know.
This is coming from a guy who's seen. I've seen Stop It, My Mom Will Shoot. I've seen all those films. I've seen just about every film he's ever done, and I always felt like he always brought the best in almost every role he's ever done. This film, he certainly brought his A game. Not only was he part of the writing process, which shows how good of a writer he really is. I don't know how 3.5, almost the other 90 minutes were for him to say that it sucked. And he had a participation in writing the film as well too. So it's kind of hard to figure out what exactly was his lines and what was not. So I'm sure that's all never going to be revealed somewhere.
It's a shame anytime they won't get that cut. But yeah, I again, like, I enjoyed the film. Even watching it now, like, watching it back, like, I remember seeing this. I remember that. I don't remember this part. You know, like, sat down, actually watched the film, like, wow, there's so many aspects of this movie I don't remember.
Yeah.
Or I remember differently than it originally played out. And it was kind of fun watch. And I think that's what it is. It's just your usual fun, action flick. And it was, it kind of set everything up for all these upcoming action flicks after it. And Stallone did a great job, and so did everybody else. One of the characters that kind of stood out for me was one of the side characters, one of the officers in the jail, who was kind of somewhat sympathetic for Rambo.
David Caruso, the redhead guy. That's David Caruso. It's I think it's like one of his, if it's not his first role in a movie, I think it's one of his early roles in the film. Really? Before he became famous for doing, I believe, NYPD Blue, and then he tried to do his own Hollywood acting, and didn't work out for him. Then he went back to television. He did CSI Miami, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, that's David Caruso, and so yeah, I didn't know who he was back then when I watched the film, up until later on in his career, where he did was it Kiss of the Jade Dragon, whatever it was, NYPD Blue, and now CSI. And then when I watched the film a couple years back, and I'm like, oh shit, that's a David Caruso. I had no idea. Like, you notice these little things, and that's what I love about these movies too, because I watched them back in the day, and then you watch it years and years and years later again, and then you start, oh, this guy was in this movie. And this is one of those like nice little Hollywood trivia you see, like that. If you look back at these films, you might come across actors that you've never realized were in the film that have a career now. Like, one of the big ones for me was Jack Black when he was in Demolition Man. He was only in for like a split second, but I remember that face so well, having seen Jack Black in other films. Watching Demolition Man, I'm thinking that was Jack Black. Like, that kind of stuff always surprises me. So I enjoy coming back to these old films here and watching, like, holy shit, that was this.
Getting a review for Demolition Man too, by the way.
What was that?
Are doing a review on Demolition Man.
Yes, my favorite action film of all time. That is my favorite action film of all time. But yes, we'll get into that at some other point there.
What do you think? Like, after rewatching it, does it still hold up? Do you still enjoy it? What are your thoughts, Rob?
Well, like I already said before, I believe the film holds up very well. I do agree with you that there are certain aspects of the film that are not going to be able to fly today, in terms of how you can get away with one man essentially being having an army called upon him to stop him from destroying the town, if you will, just because he wanted a sandwich and no one wanted to give it to him, and then he ended up going to jail because he refused to listen to them. I can see that kind of being portrayed differently nowadays here, but it is a product of his time. But I think it still speaks volumes in terms of how we treat our veterans, especially during the Vietnam era, and how we should be more sympathetic and really more helpful to them. Because if we don't do anything about that, which I don't want to get into the whole political side of it, but it definitely got me thinking about that aspect of it more so now than I did back in the day when I first saw the film. I just kind of took it for granted for what it was, and then having rewatched it, a lot of different thought processes go through my mind now. So I love the film, and in fact, I love it even more than I did the first time for a lot of different reasons, as you can tell now. But yeah, that's my thought. And I mean, what's yours at this point?
I could definitely say now that I actually appreciate it more for what it is. I actually appreciate the story. Because to me, I thought it was just a guy who was just trying, like, to me as a kid, I was like, he was just wanted to eat, Dad. That's all he wanted. He was trying to use the knife to eat. Like, so I instantly gravitated toward hating the sheriff character because he was just trying to find something to eat with his knife, you know? And but watching it now and kind of looking back, I'm actually able to appreciate the movie for what it is, because it was kind of a war at home kind of. And able to actually understand the story and understand what was going on. You can see why Rambo was a sympathetic, or was actually turned into a more sympathetic character, and how the sheriff kind of did abuse his power and let his pride get in the way, and almost cost him, because it cost him his men, and it probably cost him his child
too.
It almost cost him his life. So overall, it's a great flick. I thoroughly enjoy it. I give it 2 cheers up.
2 cheers up for myself as well too. So those are our thoughts of the film here. So share us your thoughts and let us know what you think of the film, because not only is this film a classic, though, and like we mentioned before, it holds up very well. If you haven't seen the film, go and check it out. And in the meantime, check out the other films in the series as well too. They do.
We're going to be doing this every week. So next week we'll be dropping these videos for the other sequels. So let us know down in the comments. Did you hate it? Do you love it? Do you like part 2? Do you like part 3? What about the latest one? Are you excited for Last Blood? Because I know we are.
So if you haven't done so already, please subscribe on our channel now and follow us on Instagram at New Release Wednesdays, and we're also on Twitter at TheNRW. And you can follow myself on Twitter at RobMedina0585, and you can also follow me on Instagram, Rob_Medina0585, and my man David at.
You can follow me at David is Disaster on my Twitter or on my Instagram anytime, or just hit me up on my Facebook page at David is Disaster. Just look us up either way. You have different contacts, not only from the rest of the RWQ, from us too, but if you want any more reviews, you want any more comics, you want any more other info, pop culture info, always follow us at NRW or New Release Wednesdays here on YouTube. Hit that click, like, and bell sign right down here somewhere in this general direction. Check out the annotations up here for any other videos, and we'll see you next week.
Until next time, cheers.
No.